Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Farmer Sense podcast. I am your host, Rick Willard. Andrew Foof is my co-host. He was smiling. He was waiting for me to say something smart-ass, but I couldn't think of anything at the moment. So maybe he's got something to say.
I don't have anything intelligent or smart-ass to say. Hi, Rick. How are you today?
Good. How are you, Andrew?
I'm phenomenal, I guess. It's Friday.
Great.
We're recording this on a Friday morning, so.
Well, yeah, I can't drink yet.
That's true. Well, you could if you were tailgating. You know, if it was football season, there was a football game at 11, I'd probably be tailgating if I was there.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
no doubt about it. We already interviewed Cassidy.
Cassidy Million from
PhycoTerra.
Helia. Yes,
Yeah.
I got it.
Helia. Yeah, that was well, you'll get to hear it after we ramble on, but that was a really good podcast. People need to listen to it. Definitely. Yep. And we'll have it on YouTube. You can check it out.
For sure.
But I got to remind people, sorry to interrupt you. I got to say this. I sent out messages telling people about us being on YouTube, but some of them didn't even know we were on Spotify. So we got it. I mean, people think that we're just posting on YouTube right now, but we're on Spotify, we're on Amazon Music, we're on Apple Music.
Anywhere you can find your podcast, basically.
Yeah, pretty much. And
so
then we
listen to us on the go.
Yeah, so this is our 8th podcast now, and we only have 3 of them on YouTube that were actually videoed through this app. So I guess I could put the other ones on there, but they're not very good.
Yeah.
Most of them were recorded through Zoom. And
poor video quality, poor audio quality. We're learning as we go. We're trying to make them better. But
the best one was the Brian Split, Jesse Allen one, where I forgot to record the video.
That one was phenomenal. I don't know. Cassidy today was really, really good. I'd say she's right there with the other ones. The last couple we've had great guests, so intelligent, such high level conversation. It's if you're into technical farming, these are the people you need to listen to because they're so good.
Yeah. And if you are listening, tell other people to listen.
Yeah, please do. I don't know. Yeah. Our guests make me feel dumber every time. I'm like, man, I don't know shit. Like I thought I kind of had an idea.
Yep.
That's a cool hat, Rick. You want to talk about that?
Web Western. Yep. We're in a little agreement with them. So if you want Web Western clothing, this is the W it's a straight shooter arrow. That's what that stands for. You're a straight shooter. You are a straight shooter.
Wow.
Go to their website, check it out. It's a hardworking straight shooter person, no bullshit type Western wear. Very small company. They don't have a lot of things out. Their hats remind me of a Richardson 112 fit. So
nice.
Similar.
Don't you have a code or something you sent me?
Yep. Farmer Sense 10. You get 10% off.
Awesome. I need to order my hats. You sent me that just the other day, and I was in the tractor, and I'm like, I will do this when I get some time. So
yeah, this is the John.
Stylish, man.
This is the John 3:16 one, and then inside on the webbing, it gives the John 3:16 verbiage, and then they also can do branding. They actually branded that or burnt it with a branding iron into the bill. So
I saw that on TikTok. That was cool.
Make
sure you check them out on check us out on TikTok, and
we're trying
to push it. Yeah, we'll see if TikTok's still around, but I think it will be.
It will be. What a joke.
Yeah, no, they try to shut it down every so often, but I love TikTok. It's a time wasting son of a gun, but God, I learned some interesting shit on there.
I'm still an X fan.
I know. Well, now that you've learned to scroll down, I mean, how can't you be? Now you know what the fuck's going on. I had to get that little in there. One more from last week. I'm sorry, man.
Well, okay. So, excuse me. Teach me this one on TikTok. I'm done following people. Do you know why? Because every time I follow somebody, then down in the bottom it shows that your friend or whatever has a video,
Yeah.
and I go watch it, and
Uh-huh.
then 5 minutes later it pops up that the friend has a video, and it's the same freaking video again. It's just
Yeah,
what's the
that's
deal?
something new. I don't know. It never used to come up and say your friend just posted a new video. That's something new, but
I don't like it.
I don't. It's something different. I don't like it either. But
I literally went on and started so if any friends I have that have noticed, probably unfollowed you because I'm sick of that popping up all the time. Because as long as I like your videos, they come up anyway. I mean, the algorithm,
right.
like if you post something and I like it every time, it's always going to show it to me.
Yeah.
So, but I'm sick of that little icon. I don't like message icons on my phone. Like if I get an email, I got to look at it quick or erase it. Like right now, I have one on there. Like I don't like
Yeah.
things on my phone that aren't supposed
See,
to be
I am the exact same way. If it dings or if I have something on the top, if there's one notification up there that is not supposed to be, it annoys the crap out of me. I don't know if it's the OCD or whatever.
there. Hmm.
I finally have just shut off my notifications because
Most of mine are. Yep.
that's the only way that I mean, like TikTok, I don't get the notification on
No.
top other than if I'm in it and somebody posts a video.
Yes.
So, but I can't have it because if not, I will not get anything done. I mean, I have a problem getting stuff done anyway.
Hmm.
But when you got all this other distraction crap, it's like, well, maybe it's something super important, and I'm like, nope, it's not.
Hmm.
But
It's definitely OCD, especially if you have problems getting things done. Because that's how I am. I start on one thing, and then I'll walk the other side of the shed to get something, and I'll see like, oh, that's not in the right place, and I'll start like organizing, and then I'll be like, what did I come over here for? What am I
yep,
working on? I'll be, oh yeah, and I'll go back. So that's kind of where I was the last couple of days, doing some planter updates. Our Case IH planter, all the closing discs were complete dog shit junk. I'm saying that I might be a Case IH fan, but they dropped the ball on that one. They really screwed up some of my emergence last year in my cornfields, and it pissed me off because the way the two-stage closing disc work, the two discs pivot on a pin, and that just wears out like crazy, and it's just sloppy. Hell, I lost one of the closing discs out in the field. Had to take 2 hours to drive around to find the damn thing, and I don't know how many pins I replaced last year, and it's not like a 2 minute project. It's like a half hour because you got to they they wear out so much that you have to, you can't even pound it through the other side because of the way it's wore. It'll like catch and I was
I remember last spring you were super
oh
frustrated about
it took me.
those pins. Yeah,
I think the most I got planted one day was like 120 acres. Otherwise, I averaged like 50.
yep. That's like me with my precision planting planner.
Yeah, well, don't that monitor ain't the best either.
Yeah,
I think we've talked about that before. Precision does not like red equipment.
yeah. Precision just
So,
doesn't like me, so I'm not gonna bash them here. But it's
but
just
I did replace them. They had a great. Oh, and then they didn't recall it. Of course, they gave you a rebate, so it paid for some of it. But
yeah,
I ended up doing it myself, which wasn't a big deal. My dad helped me, and I think we did 16 rows in 4 hours the first day, and it took 16 rows. We did 3 hours the next day. The hardest part was getting off the dust caps off of all the closing discs because I didn't have the right tool. I just had one of those punches with the little hook on it
yeah.
and those are a joke. I don't know why I never had an actual dust cap removal tool or pliers, but I ended up getting one from Mariah, my Snap-on girl, because I wanted one quick, and she didn't have one on hand. So I went to old Harbor Freight to get a piece of junk one until she could get me a good one. They didn't even have one.
Really?
Amazon had them, but I wasn't going to wait 3 days. You know, when it used to be Amazon Prime and you get it the next day. Yeah, it's a fucking joke now too.
Yep.
Pardon my French. I guess we're just going to swear a lot today.
Obviously, we're in the mood.
Yeah. So Anyway, she drop shipped it to me. She was on vacation actually, and I got it, and yeah, piece of cake getting those dust caps off now, and yeah, it didn't take very long. It was a pretty good process.
Nice.
What'd you do? You did some.
I did some sketchy shit. I talked about it, here about in our interview with Cassidy, but did some strip tilling this week. Some of it was really good. It was unnerving how mellow the soil was. Like, people drove by and they're like, God, it looks wettish. I had one guy call me. He goes, are you just out there packing the hell out of that? And I'm like, no. I'm like, you wouldn't even believe it. I mean, a rototiller didn't even do as good a job as what this was doing. I'm like, it is so fine. Now, if you get down, 5.5 inches, there was a little bit of muck on the blade here and there, but it was only in the spots that are terrible soil and that hold water. So it wasn't that big. Very, very few acres, but I'm like going through, I'm like, you can see the soil type changes because of the soil color, because of how fine it was mixing it up. So I am super excited with the way it looks, other than we were going to get rain. We got rain Wednesday night. Actually got rained out, but I was like, well, I'm going to get a 2-inch rain and it's going to pack the holy hell out of this and I'm going to regret doing it. But we got about, I don't know, 1/2 inch maybe total. It rained yesterday and I never saw what we ended up with, but I think it's going to be okay. So,
that the dry spots, you're not going to get much compaction, but yeah, in those wetter areas, you could have with that, wet, not being able to dry out and then getting rain on it. That's usually.
Yeah. Well, I'm hoping that the wet spot had 24 hours roughly. We're talking a wet spot that's as wide as a desk, maybe 10 feet long. Yep. So it wasn't that big a deal, and it's always wet, so it's just one of those deals. But I'm just worried down underneath because I don't normally strip till in the spring, trying something new, putting my nitrogen, putting my sulfur and zinc down in my strip on top of my P&K that I put last fall. I'm putting a little bit of potassium in this time. I'm adding an additional 20 pounds just to see if that helps my nutrient uptake right away early in the season. So it's right there. Probably not. Gonna try it. Who knows?
Wonderful.
Had a band concert last night. Lily and Peyton both had band and choir, so that was fun. That was really exciting. Oh yeah,
good.
Yeah. So, well, you want to talk about Cassidy since that's what people really want to hear about?
There was one other thing I wanted to talk.
Oh, I'm sorry. About. What do you want to talk about?
I forgot.
Figures.
I don't think anybody wants to sit here and wait for me to remember.
I do. I want to know. I was supposed to tell you something from Glenn Young up there.
Oh, keep your eyes up. So your eye level is supposed to be down 1/3 from the top of the screen. So make sure you do that. Glenn was
critiquing.
He couldn't sleep one night.
That's what he said. We were putting him to sleep. So
yeah, so he watched us, and yeah. Anyway, so I got a few critiques. I had to Google what he was talking about, because he's actually an editor and he was using all these big words. But
yeah. Well, anyway, shout out to Glenn out there. He wanted me to give you shit about something, and we were talking in the tractor the other day because I thought he did some spring strip till, but he does it in the fall. So I'm sorry, Glenn. I forgot to get whatever I was supposed to tell him.
Okay.
Sorry.
Yeah. No. Excuse me. My voice has been all weird. Apologize to all the viewers. You're just staring. You're like
waiting for you to wrap it up so we can talk about who we're.
Okay. You're the guy, we can wrap it up. We got Cassidy
coming. Cassidy Million with PhycoTerra and Helia.
Yep.
Enjoy.
Yeah. Enjoy. Thanks. Good morning, Cassidy. How are you this morning?
I am great. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. Andrew, he just fought tooth and nail. He's like, we got to get Cassidy on here. She's the best. He saw you at the Total Acre Conference, and he just said you did a great job with your presentations. I unfortunately did not have time. Well, some of the breakouts were segregated. They overlapped, and I didn't hit your guys' breakout with PhycoTerra. But so you are the VP of Ag Science at PhycoTerra, correct?
Yes, correct.
Yes, and PhycoTerra is your sister company, or is Helier?
So it's a little confusing there.
Go into that, please.
Yeah, so Helier is technically our parent company. And for the ag side, most of it, everyone knows us by PhycoTerra. Both of them are extremely hard names to pronounce, so we just stick with the one out in ag, PhycoTerra. Helier is really where we got our start in 2008. They are our R&D part of the company, research and development. They really focus on the technology and production of microalgae. And then PhycoTerra is our agriculture piece of the company.
Okay, great. So you used to work with Monty's Plant Food, excuse me, and you were one of their scientists. How did you maybe go through a background of where did you start? Where did Monty's come into play, and now PhycoTerra? Kind of go through that progression, if you would.
Yeah, absolutely. So I had my PhD. Actually, I'm a plant pathologist by training. Once I left Ohio State with my PhD, I actually moved to Sweden and started working on the microbiome potato. I really want to connect. I understood the plant pathogen interaction side, but I really want to connect where the soil microbiome fits into the whole production system. So that's where the reason I went to Sweden and started really focusing on long-term effects of fungicide biocontrol application to the soil and how we're changing the microbiome over time. Once I was finished up there, I actually then moved back to the US and worked for government USDA on wheat and barley. And then I found Monty's after that. So I moved to Monty's. That was really my first stint in the industry side, not academia or government. And at Monty's, I was their senior agricultural research scientist. So really helping develop that program, validating products in the product pipeline, and then also helping training the commercialization team and finding a fit for those in production agriculture. From there, I found PhycoTerra. So PhycoTerra focuses mainly on, leveraging the native microbes, which is soil health. Obviously, you'll get a background here is one of my passions. So their whole story and their flagship product is soil health. So when I saw their facilities and the amount of they invested in research, it was somewhere I was like, this is something I have to continue to explore. So now I'm here with PhycoTerra.
Yep, very good. Yeah, like you said, Rick said earlier, we talked to in Houston at the Total Acre Grower meeting, and you really dove into soil health and some of the products that you guys have. What's the most interesting thing in the soil health side in maybe corn soybean rotation production that really interests you that you think PhycoTerra can help just the average grower?
Great question. So soil health is really the biological portion of the soil when we're talking about it. So we confuse soil health and soil quality. We use them interchangeably. Technically, if we really want to split hairs, they're not the same thing. So soil health is focusing on the biological integrity of your soil. And if you look at agricultural soils, especially soybean and corn production, we have depleted the soils over time, from tillage practices to chemical inputs to corn on corn rotations. Over time, we have depleted those soils, and we see it. We see it with compaction. We see it with leaching, of our nutrients in the soil. Even going out like mid-season, you can't put a shovel into the ground. That shows you have some biological integrity issues. So we see it across the entire U.S., not just corn and soybean. And what the theory behind it is, the microbes are still there. They're just not functioning because they're not able to function. They don't have the habitat, the nutrient, the food sources to actually do what they need to do. And so that's where the idea of PhycoTerra came from. If we can put out a food source to break those microbes out of their dormancy and put them back to work, we should start to see this biological integrity come back. And we've proven this over time. So we've looked at long-term studies of applying PhycoTerra to the soil, And we can see within season 1, we're starting to see this soil health shift in terms of actually changing the microbial community. So we see more microbes and a lot of different types of microbes, the diversity piece. And then we also start to see a change in soil aggregation and water holding capacity. And we see that compounds year after year. So soil health is definitely not a year journey. It's a long-term thing you have to invest within. And we see those compounding effects year after year.
Awesome. So that's one of my questions. And I'm doing some trials of your products. I believe it was Chad that I talked to last week. I'm really interested in the compaction element. I'm corn on corn, and I did some sketchy shit this week with my strip till machine that was really not what I had planned. They mixed up an extra batch, and I was like, I'm really ready to be done, but they had it mixed. So I went out. It was a little wetter underneath about 4 inches. And so compaction is a concern. So I'm looking forward to trying that. What product do you kind of recommend for the soil compaction side?
From our product line, it would be our PhycoTerra product. So I know our products lines are a little confusing too. They're all PhycoTerra.
Yeah.
So we have PhycoTerra and PhycoTerra Organic, which are the same exact products, just organic is OMRI certified with the stabilizers. Then we have PhycoTerra ST, which is our seed treatment. And then we have PhycoTerra FX, which is our foliar. So when I say PhycoTerra, I'm talking about our soil applied flagship product. Okay. That product is really focused on soil health. You apply it directly to the soil, whether that be broadcast, pre-plant, in furrow, 2x2, post-emergence. And the idea there is when you apply the product, it's going to be as food source to feed the native biology you already have there. So we're not adding any living biology to your soil, but we're leveraging what's already natively present. So to give you an idea, around 75% of the microbes in your soil are dormant. So you're not getting that full functionality. So we can break those out of dormancy. And so what we see is once we activate the microbes, we increase the abundance, so the number of the microbes present, and then also the diversity, the different types of microbes present in your soil. And that's really key because we know microbes do a lot of different things. So to give you an idea, we know less than 1% of what is happening in the soil in terms of microbiology diversity. So we want to feed as many things as we can because we know they're all secreting different things and doing different activity in the soil. But from a compaction standpoint, the microbes we know are doing is secreting what's called EPS, which is long-term extracellular polymeric substances. But all you need to know is EPS. If you Google EPS, it'll come right up, I promise you. So EPS is a glue-like substance. And what that does is it physically sticks your soil particles together. So as you drive those soil particles together, we start to see that reduction in compaction. We're creating more space in the soil. We're creating better soil aggregation. So we can get more air, more water, and we'll start to see that decompaction decrease over time.
Awesome. And you're not doing live, it's not a live food source, right? It's a chemical induced food source.
So it's not a chemical either. We are not.
Okay.
So what we are, the basis of all of our products is microalgae. So microalgae are probably the less known of all the algae out there. They're microscopic, so you cannot see them with the naked eye. They're single-celled plant-like organisms. So if you look under a microscope, they look like these little green circles. So they actually can do photosynthesis like a plant. So take sunlight, water, carbon dioxide, and they convert it to biomass. So what we do is we mass produce this biomass, and then we pasteurize the product. So it's not an extract, it's actually the entire cell that we're harvesting. And when we pasteurize it, we kill all the microalgae. So nothing within our product is living, everything is dead. And we do that for multiple reasons. One is shelf life. It increases the shelf life up to 2 years. And then secondly is compatibility. So it's not like using a biological that you have to think about, where you're storing the product at, temperature, UV, mixability. The product's dead, so you can't kill it more than it already is. You can sit it out in the sun, you can bake it. We've tested it. So we're located out of Arizona. We put a tote out in the Arizona sun and let it bake. It's 140 degrees sometimes out there. We let it bake for months, brought it back in, and it's still viable product because it's dead.
That dry heat, right?
Yeah, it's a dry heat.
It's not bad, but it's bad. I promise you, it's bad.
Well, I don't know about you, Andrew, but she just answered every question I had.
Really?
So,
That's
yeah, I
it?
think
Oh.
we're done. I think we're done.
Oh, no. I like it because I put fungicide in my furrow. So that's what I liked about when I
Yes.
heard your presentation, that you can throw it in there because it's not living. It's not going to die anymore, like you said, than it already is. So, it does feed the fungi, right, as well?
Correct. Yeah. So we're a food source for both bacteria and fungi. Um, we talk about bacteria a lot because it's just easier to measure. That's just the simple behind it. But we do testing and we can see that we increase the fungal communities as well. Visually to show that to you, it's much more difficult. We have to like get into genetics and DNA and showing you tables that will bore you to death. So our visuals are usually showing you bacteria because they're prettier and easier to interpret.
So fungi, and correct me if I'm wrong, um, kind of it's it's like a long chain, or it's kind of ties throughout the soil, and a lot of our tillage equipment is kind of what breaks that up. So then we have to kind of mend it back and bring it back. I don't know if I'm really asking a question. I'm trying to make myself sound like I'm smart, but I mean, is that true? Is that what? And we want, what's the ratio? Do we want to have a 1-to-1 bacteria to fungi?
Yeah. Okay. So you're right. They grow. It's the technical term is called hyphae.
Yes.
So what I like to call it's like a spider web underground, and that's kind of what it looks like. And that spider web is what physically ties the soil together underground. So it also helps with the soil aggregation, the structure too. Hyphae grow a lot slower than bacteria and bacteria. So bacteria can replicate depending on temperature within minutes of itself and duplicate itself. Fungi, because they grow through those hyphal nets or spider webs underground, it takes them a lot longer to establish. So when you go through with tillage, you break up that spider web and you have to reconstruct it every time. So that's why they talk about tillage is like a tornado, if you've ever heard that through your soil. There's a lot of controversy behind that. Tillage sometimes is that necessary evil that you need to do. But yes, that's why you see usually when you do a soil test that your bacteria ratios are higher than your fungal ratios. And yeah, that's the ratio for corn and bean production. We want to try to get to that 1-to-1 ratio. For other cropping systems, there's actually different ratios we need to look at. For instance, permanent crops, that's going to be a little bit different. But we want to try to get to that 1-to-1 ratio. So doing, reduced tillage is a way to get there, but there's also a lot of other practices you can incorporate to start to leverage and change that ratio over time.
Yeah. Sorry, Andrew.
No, go for it.
The guys that have done no-till for 20, 30 years, I mean, they've solved their compaction issues with cover crops and just not working their soil and tearing it up. But it seems like the guys that want to start no-tilling now, maybe like myself, I just no-till my beans but strip-till my corn. Am I still doing that same damage that I feel that I'm not doing the same damage that my grandpa did back in the day when he plowed everything? I mean, am I correct? Am I at least alleviating some of the pain of the soil?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay.
Definitely is. And you mentioned it earlier, when you till and it's moisture underneath, like all of those things compound upon one another. So if we can do reduced tillage in the best environment, which I know is also hard, that all of those things help in terms of increasing soil health over time.
So do humics, sorry, Andrew, I'm on a roll
You're good.
here. Humics and fulvics, do they play well with your PhycoTerra product? I mean, I would assume it does, but
Yes, they do. So I've done a ton of work, obviously, because my background humics, I'm a big fan of them. So I've done a ton of work in looking at that combination of the two. So humics do things really well in terms of increasing your CEC in the soil, reducing leaching. They also play a role in soil structure because humics are volumetric in size, which means they can actually fold upon themselves and actually create physical space in the soil and push those soil particles apart. So what I like to talk about humics is they create the environment for the microbe to thrive, but they're not going to feed that microbe. That's where PhycoTerra comes in. If you can create the space, we'll bring the food to the party, right? And so we have a thriving environment for those microbes, and then a food source to actually increase the microbes' abundance and diversity. So we've looked at that in our labs. So we have a greenhouse on site. So we have looked at that, and we're seeing, the additive and synergistic effect when you pair the PhycoTerra with humics. And then there's also some field trials out there as well that shows those results in terms of yield and ROI.
Very, very nice.
Awesome. Yeah.
You just blew my mind about the fold over on themselves, the humic.
Yeah.
I couldn't get past that point. I've never heard that before.
Oh.
So I'm like still trying to comprehend how that works. But so we talked about soil. You talked about soil health. What about soil health sampling? Which one do you recommend? Is there a certain test? I mean, I've seen where you can send the soil sample off and they'll do a DNA history of that. Do you feel like that one's worth it, or is there something simpler?
So there is a lot of soil health tests on the market, and it really depends on what your focus is. So what I would recommend is a few different things. Is this something you're going to start tracking every year or every 2 years? Then the DNA tests, I know those are expensive. So it's all about budget too. I mean, you're talking $200+ a sample sometimes. And what we really want to do is take as many samples as possible. So we get limited in what we can do with those. They're great because they give you a really in-depth knowledge of what's happening in your soil at that time. So it really gets into a depth that you can't get with those other testings. But if you're looking for a cheaper option, there is a lot of other things out there, such as the PLFA analysis, which is the phospholipid fatty acid. And that's going to tell you how much bacteria and fungi and what are the main categories that you have in the soil. So it's not going to go in that detail of DNA testing, but it's going to give you an overall overview of what's going on. That's a great test to do. We do that quite a bit actually with PhycoTerra to show the mode of action. But there's also the Haney test as well that'll give you the CO2 burst. That's a great soil health test, but that's a snapshot what's happening in time. So the question is, what are you trying to measure? Are you trying to look at a change because you made a practice change or an input change? Or are you trying to look at soil health as a long-term sampling? Based on all those questions, there's better testing that you can do to track that over time.
Gotcha. How often do you think a person should be testing for the soil health? Should it be every year? Is there a certain time frame? Do you want to do it the same time every year if you're going to do it every year or every 2 years?
Yes. So similar to like the nutrient testing, we want to do it the same time every year.
Okay.
To really track that over time so you can measure the soil health changes. We also want to do it in a time where there's not extreme conditions. You're not in a drought, you don't have excess rain, you didn't just plant. We want to do it in a time that is the most representative of your field. Okay. So I would pair it to a similar with your nutrient testing where you do that in the spring or fall, because then we actually have time to interpret that test, make a change, and do something with it. Now, if you're going to make a practice change or do a product input to see if it's working, then we're going to change that. So like with PhycoTerra, what I recommend is take a sample pre-application before you plant, and then actually after you apply the product, come in 2 weeks later. The reason we say 2 weeks later is because we know our product is activated and functioning 2 weeks, so we can show you what the product's doing. So if you're going to choose a product, you can talk with your agronomist there, and they should be able to tell you soil sample at this time to show the product's working. And then we come back at harvest and do another sample, because then we can actually show you the soil health benefits you get with PhycoTerra, which is water holding capacity and the aggregation over time.
That's what's exciting for me, because I have some really heavy soils and I want to see that soil aggregation to hopefully open up some space and maybe get rid of water if it ever does rain here. But can it also help with stress mitigation? That's our drought stress, because that's what we've been facing for the last 4 years here in my area. And even Rick sees a little bit of it.
Yeah, absolutely. So microbes are key in drought stress management. I know a lot of times we don't think of that at all, but they really are the key to unlocking that in your soil. And so how that works is that microbes do a few different things. So both fungi and bacteria secrete these glue-like substances. They're different from one another, but not only do they tie the particles together, which aggregation is key to water infiltration, which I'll talk about in a minute, but they also create what's called a biofilm. So these sticky glues will hold on to whatever water you get. So they do this for themselves. They want to create a bank of water so those microbes can survive, but the plant's a little tricky, and they'll actually take their roots, grow into that, and they'll suck the water away from those microbes. So it's creating a bank underground that we can store. As we're changing soil structure, when we get those aggregations, we're creating space, right? So when we create space, when you get that rain event that you're talking about in those heavy soils, we actually can infiltrate it down into the soil, and it's not just sitting on top, running horizontal, taking your topsoil away. So we're actually able to get that water down deep into the soil profile and hold on to it for those drought conditions. The second piece is that microbes secrete enzymes and osmoprotectants. What those do is simply let the plant know, number one, hey, stress is coming, get ready, get prepared, but they also help regulate that water movement into the plant as well with those secretions. So there's multiple folds here, but what we're seeing, and we've done a ton of work on drought stress and water management, is that when you have more microbial activity, when you have more abundance, you have better water management underground.
And that's what you kind of learned down in Arizona, is what you were talking about in the meeting down there, how, very low organic material, low OM in the soils down there, and how you could see your products working even in that environment.
Yeah, so trying to grow food in the desert, it never really made sense to me. But they do it, a lot of irrigation, but in their senses, they're not getting that, rainwater, they're using irrigation, and they're constantly being cut on how much water they can utilize. Every year we're cutting back water, or that fear of cutting back water. So we actually put moisture meters in the soil, and we see that when you can activate those microbes throughout the season, we can actually maintain that water better, have more moisture in the soil profile, up to 10 to 30% more moisture. So that's potential of cutting the irrigation cycle back, or skipping a cycle, which no one wants to do. But if we ever have to do it, we actually have a solution we can work toward in doing that. And it all goes back to just activating microbes.
Yeah, so Andrew is killing me this morning. He's either taking my questions, or Cassidy is just doing an awesome job of answering everything, like all lumped together. So I'm like running out of questions over here, but I want to keep this going because you're doing an excellent job. Can I touch base on the website a little bit, and how I wanted to share that? We kind of talked about that ahead of time, and you wanted to talk about like the crop results page. So are these all test results on this? Like if I click on, well, I'll just do it now. If I click on corn, what am I going to get when I click on corn? It just tells me what products to use, or?
So what we have done, and we had an initiative last year, was we wanted to be as transparent as possible with all of our research data. So just to give you an idea, we have invested over $250 million in research. So how do we actually show you, hey, this product works? Let's publish everything we do on our CROs, which is our commercial third-party research or university trials. So that's what this is showing you, everything that's third-party. So this is all data from 2019. We're still working on uploading our 2023 data currently, but it's going to let you go through, look at all of the products we have currently on the market and the trials we've done. This is specifically on corn. So it tells you the first thing here is where you can actually apply the products during the season. And then if you go down further, we can filter out by country, because we are in Canada as well as Latin America, but also state, trial year, product, application type. So you can really narrow that down to what do you want to look at, and then the data is all there. So we want to be as transparent as possible with what we're doing, so you can see regional results and have that information for yourself.
Does anybody apply this in their strip in the spring if they don't have like in furrow or something on their planter? Have you ever heard of anybody applying it in their strip till?
I actually had somebody ask me if they could do that this year, and we're going to try that. I would assume we've had people do it and just we're not aware of it. But we do broadcast, like weed and feed broadcast applications with the product often, with those who don't have in-furrow 2x2, and it's a great application method as well. So yeah, I think that's definitely an option. We're going to examine that this year and actually get some hard fact data on what that looks like.
I can't believe you would think somebody would try a trial without letting you guys know.
It happens all the time.
Yeah, absolutely it does.
What kind of win rate are you seeing on maybe the PhycoTerra Now I forgot which one it is. Just the PhycoTerra that you put like in furrow, not the seed treatment.
The soil applied PhycoTerra product with corn, we're a 5-to-1 ROI. That's our 2019 to 2022 data, and with soybean, we're a 6-to-1 ROI.
Gotcha. What kind of application rates? That was my other question. Do you have to put a bunch of product on, or does it just take a little bit to feed those microbes?
So our application rates for broadacre crops is a quart an acre. And that quart an acre is, like I said, flexible. You can do a broadcast, pre-plant, in-furrow, 2x2, post-emergence. We also have great data on side dress data around V6 for corn as well.
Are you only needing to do it one time? So say I put it in furrow, should I also throw it in, maybe at my V4 pass, or should I wait till tassel with my fungicide?
So all the data I just talked about is one-time application around planting. But we can stack technologies. So you can use a seed treatment with a soil applied. You can use it with a foliar as well. So a great application would be like the in-furrow or broadcast application, and then with your fungicide with the FX product lineup. That'd be a great combination, because the other two products, the seed treatment and the foliar, are not going to give you soil health benefits. They're going to leverage your microbes, but they're not going to have that direct impact on soil health. So it's really, what are you trying to achieve? And then what product makes sense in your operation?
There, you just answered my next question. Oh, I'm finding this funny. I'm sorry. I was just gonna say, what's the best bang for a farmer's buck, or do you recommend? I assume you have the seed treatment, all these set up for certain farmer applications, that they might not have or they have. So,
yeah. Exactly. Yeah. So it's really a few questions. What are you trying to achieve? Is soil health your main objective? The PhycoTerra product line, I would recommend all the time. If that's, if you feel like you have a great soil health program, that's really not your main focus. The seed treatment is a great option. We have really phenomenal ROIs on that product. It's low use rate, relatively inexpensive. Also, it's easy, a no-brainer. You coat your seed and then you're done for the year. That product, though, again, is not going to give you soil health benefits. It's going to help with more even stand, and better plant vigor, so root and shoot vigor early in the season. So you'll see that if you go out V3 and dig your plants and do the seed treatment, you'll see a difference in the root and shoot biomass compared to the control. The foliar is a little different. So that's our new product. I'm super excited about it because it feeds what we call the phyllosphere, which no one's really talking about right now. And all the phylosphere is a fancy term for the above ground portions of the plant. So we were talking about the leaves. So rhizosphere underground with the roots, phyllosphere up top. And that product is really based on plant health and abiotic stress relief. Pairs great with a fungicide application. And we're seeing out in the field, the leaf architecture is changing. We're getting that ear leaf to continue to grow. When you get into mid-season, it's drought stress, heat stress. It's a rough time for usually all of us. And we're seeing benefits there. So getting more nutrients, sugars, nutrients to that ear. So we're gaining more weight through the season, leading to higher ROIs. But it's all about what you're looking at, but they're also stackable too. So there's a lot of flexibility there.
Andrew and I were just going to ask a question at the same time.
Go for it.
Let me go. I'm getting killed over here. It's like a competition between Andrew and I to see who has the best questions.
Yeah.
We can vote at the end.
Yeah. Okay. Perfect. We'll do that. Now I forgot my question. No. So you talked about. So I'm going to put PhycoTerra in furrow when I plant. And you talked about coming back a couple weeks later and doing a soil test. Mm-hmm. Do I need to be taking that soil test within like 2 or 3 inches of where I planted, or, like right below? I don't think I'm going to go in between a 30-inch row and take one and see a difference. Am I?
Right. So what we want to see is, and we've actually looked at this, we've looked at sampling in the row. Okay. And, between the rows. Between the rows, we actually have seen some movement, but not like we're seeing in row where we're concentrating that product. Okay. And the reason we want to concentrate it there is because you want the microbial activity associated with those roots. Like that's where you're going to get the biggest bang for your buck, right? So I would recommend taking it the closest to the row that you can, at about 6-inch depth into the soil. If you start going super deep into your soil profile, there's not a lot of microbial activity. So like you hit 3-foot depth, there's not a lot of anything going on down there, especially if it's early in the season. And we're talking about 2 weeks post-application. So you're not going to see a lot of movement in terms of microbial activity. So 6 inches as close to that row as possible.
Okay. So you're saying even 6 inches over and down. I mean, you're kind of getting a balloon effect within 6 inches of the row after a couple weeks. So
yeah. So 2 weeks. I mean, we look at how long we can feed those microbes. So we've looked at this extensively in terms of who do we feed, how long do we feed. So 2 weeks we really see as a great window of we know you're going to start seeing that change in your microbiome. So take it at 2 weeks, send it off. PLFA would be a great test to do because that's going to tell you abundance and diversity and how much biomass you have. But make sure you take that test pre-application so we have something to compare it to.
Okay, thanks.
Now I'm going to go back. I'm back.
Go ahead, Andrew.
Sorry. Well, that extended ear leaf has got me interested. So if you're spraying that in season, are you spraying it like right before tassel and you're still seeing that extension on the ear leaf, or is that an earlier application to get that?
It's actually later. So we've been doing it around R1 with a late fungicide application. We have looked at like a V6 foliar application as well, but a lot of what we're shifting to is R1. And because that's where I think a lot of the yield starts dropping off. I think a lot of people say, hey, we got the ear developed, we're done for the year, we're going to walk away. And it's like, yeah, you still have a ton of weight to gain on that ear, and that's where your yield's going to come from. Don't give up. So we're seeing, and also there's a high UV stress. Usually we're getting to some sort of drought that time of year, low moisture. So we're trying to think if we can give it a kickstart right then, we can gain more weight. And the data we have so far is showing phenomenal results with that. Keeping the plant healthier, seeing extended growth, and just gaining more weight, getting more ROI. So to give you an idea, we're on 6-to-1 ROI with an 8-ounce application of that foliar around R1 on corn.
Yep. I'm going to have to do another trial, I guess, of that since we do a ground rig. Rick and I have a joke that I said, I don't know, a month ago, I was done going to do trials. And I think I've now added like 7 more trials in the last 2 weeks. So I don't know. I ordered my flags yesterday, so I'm going to have flags everywhere. So you were also talking about there isn't much microbial activity below, what would you say, 6-8 inches? Do you think sorry, go ahead.
A little lower. So once you get 2-3 feet, that's where you start to get microbial activity decline.
Do you think you would ever benefit from deep placing some of the PhycoTerra to feed the bacteria lower in the profile to help move nutrients up and down?
That's a great question. So it's all about where do your roots go to. So if you're not going to have that root life that's able to actually get down to that level, which like if you're having compaction, you have a hard pan, once you hit 300 PSI, those roots aren't able to penetrate that soil. So if you have a penetrometer, that's a great tool to go out to check, like, where's your compaction at? Where's that layer starting? So if your plant roots can't penetrate down there, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to place the PhycoTerra down there. But if you have soil that's not compacted, it might be a great opportunity to do the application. You're going to have different microbes there because you start to change that soil profile to how much oxygen, how much water. So it's going to change a bit. But if you can get your roots living down there, it's also great to feed the microbes and continue those associations.
Okay. Well, that's what I mean, because if you're talking 8 inches deep with the test, how deep do you say your product goes if I would put it in furrow? Would it go down 2 feet? Because I would say my roots are, in that top 2 feet for sure.
So what we see with the product is, again, it's non-living, so it's not going to colonize and like a inoculant put in the soil. Right. So it's going to move with whatever moisture you have out there. You're not going to see, we haven't seen extensive leaching. I know a lot of people, especially with the residue management application, are worried that it'll leach out of the soil or the UV is going to kill it off, or, all of these different issues. The product's going to stay there until it gets consumed by a microbe. Just because it's non-living and it has this really hardy cell wall that it has to eat through before it gets to all the goodies inside, which is the mode of action. So the movement's going to be dependent on how much you're putting in that in furrow in terms of movement, and then also do you get a rain event that waters that down deeper.
Okay, because that's my question is like, well, okay, if it's really good at my in furrow and it goes down a little bit, wouldn't it be better to have it down, 12 inches or 13 inches, and then as those roots find it, there'd be additional food for for the microbes down there. That was kind of my initial question, I guess, because I'm not very smart and I'm trying to learn.
No, it's a concept, and we've actually had some other people ask us about this and potentially set up a trial, but we went to the in-furrow, and the reason we keep at that level is because we want colonization of the microbes. So if you can get colonization and establishment of your microbes, they're going to help feed other microbes in that rhizosphere. So as long as we can get that healthy rhizosphere established, those microbes are going to transfer throughout the root because they actually will get inside the root and move. There's some really cool videos on YouTube if you're like want to nerd out and look at microbial movement and like coming in through the root tips and out of the root tips and out of the root hairs. I can watch it for hours, but
I'm writing it down because I want to try to find it on
what
YouTube.
is it? I'll nerd out. I need something to fall asleep to.
There you go. It will put you to sleep for sure. But we want to just get that colonization happening. So we can even get it out happening at that when the root's smaller. It's going to continue to thrive in that plant and continue to grow and support that plant throughout the entire season.
Awesome. Rick, do you have a question yet, or do you want me to go again?
I did. I did. It was you asked it. I don't know. I pointed to myself on the video when you were asking it, but so disease suppressive soils. Can we talk about that a little bit? I think I found it somewhere in the education tab on your PhycoTerra website. And now, what would that constitute? What is a disease suppressive soil?
Yeah, so I wrote an article last year for the Progressive Crop Consultant on disease suppressive soils. So my background is a plant pathologist, so I really nerd out with, suppressing naturally. I think that's a super cool concept. And so what this is that it's a soil that's able to suppress a disease for the crop that's growing in it. So you don't have to put anything out in terms of controlling that disease, but the microbes that are already present, whether that be a specific species or a group of microbes, can actually suppress a disease and increase plant health and reduce a disease incidence all on its own. So it sounds like a phenomenon, but we actually found these naturally. So there's something called take-all disease in wheat. It's a fungal pathogen. There's actually no resistance at the time for that crop. So management was there was no disease resistance to select. So they found there's actually this fluorescent Pseudomonas strain that you can inoculate the soil with, and it'll create what's called disease suppressive soil. So that take-all disease could not infect the wheat. So it's a sort of natural suppression. Why is this important for everybody else? There is some literature showing that we can actually create over time. So there's things we can do in terms of soil health, and it goes back to the microbiome. What we know is you need a lot of diversity, a lot of microbes, and potentially we can start creating these soils that can naturally decrease disease without having to use fungicides in the soil.
Yeah, that's good because the fungicides are killing our fungi. So,
exactly.
Or I should say the good stuff. I mean, there's still bad out there that we want to kill. Is that correct?
Yes. So, and a lot of people ask me that question. Well, if you're feeding bacteria and fungi, you're feeding the bad ones too, right? So we get that question a lot, and a lot of hesitation of they don't want to feed anything because they don't want to feed the bad ones. But what we've looked into this quite a bit. So what we know is that, for one, pathogens aren't overrunning your soil. Again, there's billions of bacteria and millions of fungi out there. Majority of them are not pathogenic. They're beneficial. They're doing things we have no idea that what they're doing. So what we see is, because we feed the entire microbiome, it's like we're lifting all ships, right? So we're not going to see an offset of more pathogenic versus beneficial, and they'll start competing. So it's kind of like a battleground underground. They're secreting antibiotics. They're eating one another. Like, it's pretty brutal what they're doing to each other, and they're competing for space, nutrients, and moisture. So that competition alone usually outcompetes those pathogenic. And then also, I'm going to nerd out for a second here. If we know how disease works, the disease triangle, I don't know if you guys ever went through that, but you have to have three things to have disease. similar to humans, right? So we call it a triangle because you have 3 different parts, and if you take one of the sides away, disease cannot happen. So that is a conducive environment, a virulent pathogen, and then a susceptible host. So the susceptible host would be your plant, the pathogen would be some sort of pathogenic bacteria or fungi or virus, and then the environment is either the plant or the soil. So if we can take one of those away, disease cannot happen. So what we look at is we're taking away your conducive environment, which is your soil health. So if we're taking away the environment for those pathogenic microbes to thrive, you're not going to see disease. And we see that in our field studies, is that we have reduced disease incidence in our treated fields versus our untreated fields.
Nice. And yeah, I had heard of that triangle thing before, but we had never spoke about it on our podcast. So I'm glad you brought that up.
I'd never heard of it, so I'm learning something new all the time. As usual.
So you've been on a lot of podcasts, correct, Cassidy? I mean, well, a fair amount anyway. I mean, we can tell you're a good speaker. You definitely know what you're talking about. But I was kind of thinking we might be behind the curve, and we didn't know if there was any secrets or anything you haven't told anybody else that maybe you could talk about on our podcast.
So great question. I would say the number one thing that I think we all miss is, there's nothing out there that's a silver bullet, especially when we're talking about soil health or these biostimulant products. You're not going to use one and it's not going to be like the savior to your operation. So it's really a journey it's understanding the products, it's stacking them together and achieving the best results in the field. So I think that's probably the number one thing to hit on. And remember, when you're looking at these product lineups and biostimulants, it's confusing marketplace. There's so much out there, but like, what do you really need? How can we pair those together? Because not one of them is going to save your operation. I think the other thing that we actually haven't talked about on any podcast, and actually have not had a lot of articles out on, is the sphere concept. I actually hit on it at the Total Acre. That was one of the first introductions I've done to it so far, just to see how it landed and how it was understood. But microbes live in what we call spheres. So we have 4 distinct spheres through the growing season, which start with your seed all the way to your residue management. So we'll go through the technical terms, so stay with me here. At your seed, you have what's called your spermosphere, which is a 1/10 of an inch region right around the seed coat and where the seed starts and the soil exists. Then we have the rhizosphere, which pretty much everybody knows about now, right around the root zone. We then have the phyllosphere, which is around the leaf surface. And then the last one, which is the hardest one to pronounce, is the tritosphere, which is where your residue management and breakdown happens. So why do we care about this? Is each distinct sphere harbors different microbial communities that do different things, but we know that they all influence one another. So your spermosphere helps shapes a healthy rhizosphere. Your phyllosphere microbes are derived from your spermosphere and your rhizosphere. And now we're seeing that if you have a super healthy phyllosphere, it can actually lead to better breakdown in the tritosphere. So it's really interesting concept that we're working on introducing because it's a little bit complex, but I think it's really the key to managing microbes throughout the entire season.
Yeah, because that's what you did have in your breakout session. And I'm like, I left that and I'm like, I obviously don't know a freaking thing about soil. When you were talking, I'm like, this is the first I've heard some of this stuff ever used. That's what was like, super interesting. I'm like, I don't have any clue what she's talking about, but you did a great job presenting it, what you were talking about, but I don't know how it affects just the regular grower. And that's where I think, you're trying to get the education out there. And I appreciate people that are doing that, because any chance we can learn, it's going to be huge for the future, I think. But,
well, and that was a good group of growers to present it to. I mean, we're on the higher level anyway, that's for sure. But what else do you have, Andrew? Anything?
I was going to say, what's the most exciting thing, Cassidy, that you are working on or looking into other than what you just mentioned? Is there something out there that you're like, man, 5 years down the road, 7 years, 10 years down the road, this is what's going to be a big thing?
Yeah, great question. So I think there's a lot of new coming to market. I think there's a lot of potential. And what I'm seeing is, because we work a lot on stacking mode of actions in this biostimulant world, if we stick to that. So I think there's some pairings out there that are a little bit of a no-brainer of why is there not a product that has these things together? Because the more we research it, the more we're seeing the synergies between them, and they work better together than by themselves. So there's some things like that I think are going to be hitting the market hopefully soon. And then internally, we're doing a ton of research. So we're bringing new products to market here in the next 2 years that everything we do is microalgae based, but we're learning how to do different inputs in terms of stacking those technologies and make it easier for the grower to use. That's always the end goal. How do we make something super easy, plug and play, that you don't have to worry about agitation, jugs, whatever. So we have some super cool technologies we're working on now just to make your life easier, but also give you the ROI that you need at the end of the season.
That's awesome. Thank you so much for doing our podcast and the great information. I'll let Rick wrap it up here, but yeah, I appreciate you taking the time, and you were so good down in Houston. I wanted to hear more about what you guys are doing, and it's very interesting. And if you ever want to do a trial, I'm in. So
absolutely. Thank you, Andrew. I appreciate that.
Yeah, and I'm sorry I missed out on it in Houston, but I feel I got some of the info by doing this. And I guess the last question I have for you is, who won the question contest, me or Andrew?
That's a tough one. If Andrew's going to do some trials for us, maybe it's Andrew, but Rick has a chance to save yourself here. So what do you got to offer?
Oh, I have a podcast you could go on and talk about. Maybe that would work. No, I think Andrew won. What'd you say, Cassidy?
It was a great conversation and great questions, because these topics are difficult. There's just so much out there. We could talk for hours on this. So
yeah, I mean, there's definitely a group that likes the technical side, but then I don't like to use the term dumb it down, but kind of have to, bring it down to some people that don't know about it yet, so we can get up to the technical part of talking about it. So I think you did a great job of just putting it out there both ways, and I'm sure Andrew agrees, or I know he does. So with that, I don't really have anything else other than, I agree with Andrew. You were a great guest, and we appreciate having you on here, and maybe down the road we'll have you again to follow up on something else. So
absolutely. Thank you guys both so much. It's been a great time.
Yeah, good.
Thank you.
Take care, Cassidy. Thank you.
Thank you as well.